Welcome to the NFL Coast to Coast Player Props Podcast, brought to you by TheLines.com. Coming to you from the East Coast right now, Josh Lander hanging with my guys Mo Nawara in the Midwest. Also got Nate Weitzer on the East Coast as well. And we are looking at week 2 after a pretty successful week 1 there, gentlemen, hitting most of our props there. I think we just missed one on that pretty fun opening slate to this NFL week. We are bringing you these videos each and every weekday. Want to make sure you are liked and subscribed to that page. Not every weekday, rather, each Friday of each week before each of these matchups start. We are missing those Thursday night games, but plenty of stuff on TheLines.com for you. Matt Brown and company have all of those island games for you as well. Make sure you keep coming back. Also want you to, if you do still need a FanDuel or DraftKings account, make sure you do head to FDPicks.com or DKPicks.com. Find those listings in your area. Also have TheLines.com. As I mentioned, plenty of great content on there, as well as our great props finder tool there. Make sure you are using that to go ahead and shop all those NFL player props to the best of your ability as you're making these bets each and every NFL week. Let's go ahead and kick things off here, gentlemen, with passing, as we are wont to do. Nate, I'm going to kick things off with you here. I believe you have an under for us and a pretty interesting week 2 matchup with those Dolphins and the Ravens.
Yeah, and I mean, you guys did great with your week 1 picks. I fucking struck out, so I will not take any credit for that, but maybe I was a little over happy with my picks in the video. The picks in the article were about 60% right, so I won't completely hate on myself here. But that is why I'm going with the under here for starters. Tua Tagovailoa, after going for 270 yards against the Patriots, I'm not really buying that he is the guy here in Miami. It's an interesting matchup because Lamar Jackson is in some ways auditioning to become Miami's franchise quarterback next year, potentially. Definitely like the Ravens in this spot, but really it's about their ability to control the pace of play. J.K. Dobbins should be active, so that should help them. Ground and pound, Baltimore, that is. They were the 7th slowest team in week 1. Miami was the slowest team in terms of pace of play. They had 1 touchdown on offense. Tua had the 9th most yak of any quarterback. Jalen Waddle touchdown on a very simple throw over the middle. He struggled against zone coverage, 86 passer rating against the zone. So you expect the Ravens to mix in more of that. Marlon Humphrey's limited at this point, should expect him to play, and Marcus Peters might also debut. So this Ravens team that got savaged by the pass last year is now a lot better in the secondary. I think they do a good job holding Tua down, along with Waddle, who I think, Pop only got over his prop because of that long slant route. Tua's passing yards prop is 2 yards higher at FanDuel and MGM at 254.5, so there's some value there versus 252. I like him under 1.5 touchdowns and pretty close to even money for him to throw at least 1 pick here in this tough matchup.
I like the Ravens a little bit this week, so I think I'm leaning the same way as you on this one. I'd be a little bit careful with the pace stuff just because both of these teams were up multiple scores in the fourth quarter. So unless you can find like maybe some first half pace, I think that would tell you a little bit more. So I just generally think Tua is going to probably struggle against a defense that's pretty good. Should be pretty good for sure. I like, in general, attacking the Ravens deeper has kind of been a better strategy in recent years. I know they have a new defensive coordinator though, so things might be a little different this year, but I don't know if Tua is capable of attacking these corners deep. Some ugly passes made it to Twitter last weekend. Yeah, it's a decently high number in a spot where I do think we see not a ton of offense from either team. And yeah, I just given that I like the Ravens a little bit at -3.5, I think I have to like Tua under a little bit here as well. He's never been a high volume passer. I don't think he ever will be. So yeah, just not a spot where I expect him to put up a bunch of stats.
Yeah, no, I'm going to concur with all of that. I love going under here with Tua in a game where, yeah, the Ravens are not showing much, but they also are a lot better this year. And as you said, get healthier in that defensive secondary, Nate. A team that I'm going to move us on to is your next pick here, Mo, under on Mr. Brady. I was eyeing that one as well as he's taken on those Saints. Decent numbers, in the last couple of seasons when he's been playing the Saints as on the Bucks, but this doesn't seem like a great spot for him and potentially some more injuries for his receivers as well.
Yeah, I mean, man, 277.5. Really big number here. Really big number for a quarterback who had pretty low volume in week one. I know they had a big lead for a lot of that game, but I think that's going to be a little bit of a theme early in this season. Probably the market still kind of thinking that they're going to attack a lot of the opposing defenses kind of the way they have the last couple of years, which has been like super, super pass heavy. Bruce Arians always been known for kind of a pass-heavy approach, and it seemed like they're kind of transitioning away from that a little bit. I felt like they were really leaning more on the run game in week one. I think with a defensive head coach now, it makes sense. I mean, there's nowhere to go but down when you're number one in the league by quite a bit in passing rate, as they were last year. And honestly, that probably understates things because they had some big leads. In neutral situations, I would guess they were by country miles the highest passing team last year. So I think we're going to see quite a bit less volume from Tom Brady this year. I think it makes sense a little bit in some ways just because the situation around him isn't quite as good as it was last year. The offensive line is noticeably worse. And right now, the weapons are way, way, way worse. So assuming Mike Evans gets, locked up by Marshawn Lattimore again, I'm not saying he's going to just get completely shut down as he has in the past, but that should affect Brady a little bit. Seems like Chris Godwin isn't going to play. Who knows if Julio Jones is going to play? He hasn't practiced yet this week. Russell Gage is banged up, but I think he's going to play because he did get in a practice limited yesterday. Yeah, it's not a great situation for Brady. I know it's inside, but the Saints, I know they struggled a little bit in week one. I'm willing to give them a pass and see how they progress because they were a great defense last year. And I like the way they've defended this offense the last couple of years. I think there's something to that. I don't think it's a small sample fluke. I think the best way to attack Brady for years has been pressing his receivers and getting some pressure. And that's what the Saints have been doing, making him make tough throws, not just sitting back in zone where he knows where everybody's going to be because he's seen the same zones 4,000 snaps in his career. I think that just makes it easy on him, and they don't make it easy on him. So last few years, averaging 247 yards per game versus them. That includes a 375-yard day. So outside of that, he's been pretty bad. I really like under this number quite a bit.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. I think this is one of the better unders to target. I think that Bucs offensive line looked very challenged against Dallas last week, and the Saints defense will be better. Dennis Allen, we know what he's done against Brady recently, but I just want to throw a quick non sequitur in there that our little gentleman's bet about Julio Jones versus AJ Green, Mo, it does look like Julio Jones has more left in the tank. So I will be taking that six pack next time I see
Let's take it easy. Let's see if he even suits up this week.
No, I'm here for all of it. Yeah, no, I'm here for all of it. I think we don't need to waste people's time too much with washed up wide receivers. But more importantly, I do love this. I think we got to talk about the Falcons are better than people think. I think Mariota is going to be better than people realize this year. That was another reason I think the Saints did look a little bit flimsy on defense against a pretty spread out offense that was moving really well with Cordarrelle Patterson as well running all over the field. So I think this is going to be a situation once again, where Brady doesn't play super well against this defense. It's better than we saw last week, and he's got a host of injuries that are hurting him right now. So I'm going to finish up the quarterback props here with just talking about Ryan Tannehill. It's just too juicy. It's not out yet as we're recording this on Friday morning because that is another Monday night game, as we have two Monday night games this week too in the NFL. The Bills and the Titans are that first matchup on Monday night, and Tannehill did not look good against a Giants defense that has been porous at best over the last couple of years, definitely last year, giving up roughly about the seventh most passing yards in the league. You're talking about a team that gives up a ton of yards per play as well in terms of the Giants' defense on those passes. Tannehill has nobody really that he's throwing downfield to that you can feel good about. This Bills team has been the best pass defense, potentially the best defense in the league since last season, definitely causing a ton of turnovers, as you saw Stafford throw 3 picks and look just absolutely awful despite throwing 240 yards. If Tannehill is anywhere around 240 yards or so, as we expect it to be, I still love that under. I don't think he gets much more than 200 or so in this one and continues to struggle. And if Derrick Henry isn't able to get downhill right away, it's going to be a very, very long night for the Titans, who are currently, I believe, 9.5 dogs as we're watching this. Recording this. But let's move on to rushing props here, gentlemen, as I think we've got some pretty fun, mostly unders. Once again, I think we feel good about that, but we do have an over. Let's kick things off with you, Nate, and Rashad Penny on those Seahawks there and what you think about his rushing props for this game.
Yeah, Rashad Penny, who in a smaller sample size, I think had the best yards per carry in the league last year at 6.3. But when he faced the Niners, they shut him down to 35 yards on 10 carries, so 3.5 there. Niners were the second best rush defense in terms of DVOA last year. Looked very good in week 1, holding the Bears. I mean, granted, it's the Bears, to 2.7 yards per carry, but that's in an absolute downpour, so it is a little bit harder to change direction and stop the run there. I mean, they allowed just 81 rushing yards per game in their last 6. This is a huge bounce back spot at home against a division rival. Expect that defensive line to be firing on all cylinders against the Seahawks offensive line that, coming into the season, Pro Football Focus rated as the worst in football. And you know, they definitely are in a letdown spot after coming up to beat the Broncos in that ridiculous finish there on Monday night. Penny at 54.5 rushing yards, or 65.5 if you tack on the receiving yards. I think there is definitely an under to be taken there as well, because Travis Homer's probably going to be getting most of the receiving work. And Kenneth Walker, we don't know how he's going to mix in terms of siphoning off snaps here. He's likely to debut here, the rookie, in week 2. At least going to take some early down work away from Penny. I mean, even if he had a full workload, I'd be worried about him topping 50 rushing yards against this team. I don't think the Seahawks as a team are going to be close to really 80 rushing yards on the road against San Francisco. So I feel pretty good about that under.
This is a tough one. Because just who knows what to expect really from the workload distribution. I mean, I'm assuming they used a relatively high pick on Kenneth Walker because they want him to get some work. So, if it's something like 50-50, then I guess this bet is probably pretty good. If Rashad Penny has still kind of something close to, I don't want to call it like bell cow, because that's not really a thing anymore outside of like Jonathan Taylor and Derrick Henry pretty much. But if he has something close to like a normal RB1 workload here, I guess this number is probably normal. But yeah, if Kenneth Walker is any sort of decent role, even like Kareem Hunt level snaps, then it's probably pretty good.
Yeah, I just don't love any Seahawks stats in this one, to be honest. I was looking at unders all over the place for them, between Geno, between Penny as well. So I don't love the Seahawks in this game. I think there's a solid reason that they're huge dogs, and they're not going to look like the same team that came out in week 1 at home ready to crush Russell Wilson, even though he still played pretty well, and they did pull out that victory. I think this is a little bit of a hangover game in that sense, even though it is the Niners who you think they continue to get up for, but it's not even really the same rivalry it was right back in the day. Not a lot of the same players. I just think it's a little bit of a different game here, and you should not feel very good about those Seahawks on the road in this one. So we moving on to a rushing prop here for you, Mo. I know we're talking about Nick Chubb, who was running all over the place last week. Seems like the Panthers do have a pretty weak defense there, stopping the run anyway. So what are you feeling here? Chubb's at 81.5, pretty big number, especially if you consider Hunt might come in and steal some carries from him.
Yeah, decent sized number for sure. Little bit, I think, inflated after a huge game last week. 140 yards, I believe he had, something like that. Pretty big number in what I think is honestly just going to be kind of what I said about the Vikings Packers game last week. Just a slow-paced, low offense game, I think, here. And the market definitely thinks that. The total is one of the shortest in the league. It's in the low 40s. The Jets, they did not have a good run defense last year. It was actually one of the worst, I think. But I kind of think that was a blip. A lot of injuries on their defense, and they were good in the years prior. So I'm assuming they're going to be solid again this year against the run. It certainly looked that way in week 1. They had a really good day on defense in general, and definitely a really good day defending the run. The Ravens, known as one of the best running teams the last few years, definitely not to where they were in Lamar's MVP year, but still a team that is dangerous on the ground and only managed 63 rushing yards. And that was when they had the lead for basically the whole game. So I do think the Jets, I guess what I'm saying is, even if this is a close game, I do think the Jets are probably going to load up the box here. I don't think anyone cares if Jacoby Brissett drops back in some pockets against them. So combination of that combined with, Kareem Hunt still getting quite a bit of work. I like under 81.5 a bit. I know it's like a number he can definitely go over if he gets another 22 carries like he did last week, but reasonable chance that doesn't happen here, just based on the pace of the game. I mean, last week there ended up being 50 points in that game.
Yeah, he only played 52% of snaps to get those 22 carries. That requires a huge time of possession advantage that the Panthers basically just gave away last week, being, once again, inept under Matt Rule's lead there. So, I mean, if the Jets are in any way better able to control the ball here, Chubb's workload should be severely diminished. I don't think, you want a guy who's playing halftime trying to guarantee that he goes over 82 yards again.
Yep. No, I'm feeling all of that for sure. And I think that the flow of that game is going to be crucial in this one. Otherwise, we wouldn't even be talking about the Jets and the Browns in this matchup, especially with Brissett playing QB. I'm going to finish us off with a guy we're going to be talking about here for a second. His name's Deebo Samuel. He's one of the most fun players to watch in the NFL. He's a wide receiver, technically, but we're talking about his rushing props because at this point, it's been made clear by both Kyle Shanahan and everybody else on that offensive scheme that Deebo Samuel is going to be getting the ball in totes in the backfield as well. You talk about no Elijah Mitchell at this point, who got hurt, looking at like 6 to 8 weeks for him starting running back. They do have solid Jeff Wilson Jr. there in the background, in the backup spot for them. Didn't play that well last week in a really ugly, awful game in that Bears game that was just pouring, and that field looked like absolute potholes everywhere. But now and Deebo still managed to get his over 30 rushing yards. He's averaging 8 rushes a game, or almost 9 really, dating all the way back to roughly the last 4 games of last season plus week 1 of this season. And he's getting those like 9 carries at 47 yards a game or so, at 31 and a half yards, still only minus 120. I feel pretty good about Deebo getting all those rushing totes. Now, I also know that Deebo's a guy that you could look at his receiving yards, which aren't too high in a lot of places, I know, and feel good about that, which is where we're going to move to after this rush total I talk about here, Mo, and ask you about his receiving props, which I know that you're also eyeing as a way to kick us off here on this next receiving prop, starting with Deebo. What are we looking at here? Like roughly 40, maybe close to 50 passing or receiving yards rather. Let me start my first question. Is it ridiculous to assume he can hit over on both his rushing and receiving props in this game?
I think under most circumstances, you don't ever want to think that's going to be a thing. In this game, I actually don't know, just because, they're big favorites and the just lack of weapons right now. I mean, like you said, you pointed out 2 huge injuries. I know that Jeff Wilson Jr. got plugged in, but man, Jeff Wilson Jr. is about as unexciting as they come. And then lack of George Kittle in the passing game. So it kind of does seem like Deebo should be the top option in both situations, basically. So I do like the receiving over. I think if it opens where I think it will, which I think we're going to see a number a little closer to 40. Last couple of times out, the number's been 50.5 for him. I'm just trying to, there's no number yet for this one, but I just, after how bad the 49ers looked in week 1 and just in a slop fest there, awful conditions, Deebo still got 7 targets. He's still going to be the top option without George Kittle. And I just don't know who else is getting the ball, basically. And the fact that Trey Lance looked so bad, I think is going to depress the number a little bit as well. I feel like they're going to want to work him into the passing game a little more after he was a way bigger part of the running game last week. When I look at these Seattle corners, It's Mike Jackson and then something Woolen, a rookie. Yeah, I'm guessing they're going to want to challenge these guys. And the Seahawks got waxed through the air by Russell Wilson and the Broncos. I mean, 7.5 yards per attempt, and that's including a few sacks. So I just think based on how bad the Niners offense looked in week 1 and the fact that Seattle did end up winning a low-scoring game, I think we might get a kind of an artificially low number here when I don't really think it should move, to be honest.
Yeah, I like the bounce back, obviously, for San Francisco based on my under for those Seattle players, and Trey Lance not being as bad as he was given the conditions there. They've got to keep peppering Samuel with targets and carries, so I wouldn't be surprised at all if he does top both of those. And we are going to keep going over here with wide receivers. I mean, the receptions prop on wide receivers has been one of my favorite picks for years now. And as the NFL just gets more and more pass happy, especially to slot guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown, I think it's one of the safer bets out there. His prop just came out at 6.5 receptions, plus money on that right now. His receiving prop is already gaining juice. I got it at 61.5. Now it's around 64 most places because that's just a bit low for a guy who has a pretty monstrous target share. If you take the sample size of his last season and week 1 where he had a 32% target share, I mean, his last 6, he averaged 10 catches on 11 targets. In week 1, he ran 34 of his 39 routes out of the slot. And that's going to be key against Washington, which is still trying to figure out what they want to do with nickel cornerback. I mean, they moved second-year man Ben St-Juste in there, and he's 6'3", 208. That's not really the body type you want in the slot. I think Kendall Fuller had a few turns trying to slow down Christian Kirk last week, but he allowed 74 yards as well. Kirk, I mean, could have had a much bigger game than he did have, but he had 117 yards and nearly a touchdown on 12 targets. So I think it's a pretty similar situation in terms of how the Lions are going to use Amon-Ra. So just like the receptions and yards, and he is around plus 150 to get a touchdown for the second straight week here as we open the season.
Yeah, Washington does not look to have a good set of defensive backs. Trevor Lawrence had quite a bit of success. They moved the ball pretty well basically all day. And yeah, Amon-Ra did not have as good of a game, I think, week 1 as a lot of people were expecting. So maybe that does push this down. I think generally speaking, both of these teams are going to be pretty over heavy, especially the Lions, until like markets adjust, I guess, because I just think the Lions have an atrocious secondary. So teams are going to be able to score on them. So it definitely would not surprise me if we get another 60-point banger here like the Lions had in week 1. Yeah, the only thing about the Lions is they just have so many different weapons. I would keep an eye on the status of DeAndre Swift here. I feel like he's a big part of their kind of shorter passing game. He says he's going to be ready to go, but if he's not, then I think more shorter targets and more basically target share for Amon-Ra would be a thing right after that.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm someone who's going to continue to eye anybody who's throwing against the Eagles, as I'm still not really impressed, despite their pretty nice offseason pickups there to shore up that defensive secondary. I still do not love that defense against the pass, and I'm happy. I mean, if you're going to be the Lions and just be able to pass, even in a moment where the Eagles know you're trying to come back and pass down 2 or 3 scores in the third and fourth quarters, still couldn't do anything about it, couldn't get any pressure on Goff. So I still I think this Lions pass attack is going to be a little bit better than people realize as well this year, to your point, Mo, and the amount that Amon-Ra is going to be getting a little bit more involved than he even was in this last game should be pretty obvious moving forward. Same scenario as what I would say for my last pick here to finish things off for us, fellas, which is DJ Moore on the Carolina Panthers. I'm going to be completely transparent and let everybody know he's on my fantasy team, and he disappointed me in week 1, and I'm somewhat betting on him in week 2 because I also watched that game enough to go, he should have had more targets. He had 6. He could have had easily 10. Baker was running a little bit for his life here and there, which wasn't great for him, as they couldn't really get much done in the run game as they were just stacking the box against Christian McCaffrey. I expect that to be the situation again 10. DJ Moore has rarely gone under 80 yards receiving in last season, really dating back to the last 2 or 3 seasons. He's averaging about that. It's his touchdowns that you can't always rely on, but I'm happy with either his receptions at 4.5. Still only minus 160 at DK, slightly better at FanDuel if you like that. And then 59.5 yards, I also really like. He had 43 or 46 on 3 receptions, 6 targets. A lot better stuff coming, I think, for him in this game as well, as the Giants have continued to be just a really, really bad pass defense, and I think that's going to continue this year. They had a lot of success against Tannehill because they did have some early success in the second half, especially against Derrick Henry. And once you stop him, the Titans aren't throwing anywhere at that point with the wide receivers that they're putting out there. And I think that's going to be the case for the Panthers. They are going to be able to at least pass the ball, dink and dunk a little bit better than what was the case for the Titans last week. And DJ Moore should expect a huge bounce back game as Baker's favorite target. So, fellas, any parting words for us before we wrap up our week 2 player props here?
Yeah, I'd just say I like Saquon in that game as well to continue his hot start. I mean, the Panthers' run defense has been terrible for years now. He's at 75.5 yards and looks like a true workhorse. Mo didn't said the bell cow is dead, but he actually led all running backs in snap share, and I guess you're not on the Saquon hype train then.
I liked under a little bit. I almost had that as my rushing play, actually. Just a spot where he only got 18 carries basically last week, and just knowing the Giants' new coaching staff, knowing how they probably want to play, I do agree that Carolina is probably a better team to attack on the ground, but I just don't know if the Giants are gonna try to do that. And yeah, he only had 18 carries, like I said. So if he has something like that, it's probably going to be tough to get over here. But yeah, I mean, I don't know, because Saquon, he does look like he has some of his juice back. I just think the Panthers have a pretty good defense generally, and this should be another slower paced, lower scoring game. So it just makes me nervous taking running back overs in games like that. I think generally unders are going to be very good there.
Probably. And just to help, though, I think the Giants are awful. I don't like taking – I really don't think they're good, and I really don't like taking any of their offensive player props. But I would consider things similar to what you were saying last week, Nate, with Daniel Jones dinking and dunking, because those out routes that he throws are just interceptions waiting to happen, which really leads to a lot more receptions for Saquon as well. I've been happy to take a bunch of reception props for RBs in these dink and dunk games, like Clyde Edwards-Helaire last night, and even a similar situation with Saquon moving forward. If you wanted to bet on him in this game, I'd probably prefer at about 3.5 receptions going over that than I would his rushing yards specifically. But either way, we're in for a fun week 2, gentlemen. We've had a really good time with this show so far. That is all the time that we have for you in this one. So do want to make sure you're liked and subscribed. Continue to follow along with us. Make sure you're on TheLines.com. Plenty of other great football pods we're putting out each and every week. Also, plenty of great content on the website there, written stuff for you guys, Mo, Nate, and the gang. So make sure you come back to us next week. And until we see you next, happy betting.